one of the people that has been a member in the gym, or had been a member in the gym for almost 27 years, passed away on Friday. Now, last year she found out that she had colon cancer and was given until July to live last year. Yeah. And she actually went beyond. She went through July, came to Christmas, was excited about the fact that she could still celebrate Christmas. New Year came and she was ecstatic that she could. And you could say it's almost a year and a half that she wrestled against the whole thing, and actually only passed away on Friday last week. Now, I know it sounds almost strange that I'm bringing this up, but what I watched with her as she went on was, if you knew that your life was coming to an end, somebody came to you and said, this is going to happen to you in 3 months' time, or you've got 3 months left to live, what would you do? And it was very interesting to watch the way that she approached the whole thing. And it made me think, and I want you to go with me I'm going to start off with Matthew 13, and I'm going to link it to something, because what I've indicated I'm going to be basically doing today is to give the impression as to what we can expect to happen before Jesus comes. What is it going to be like, and what is his return basically going to really be all about? So Matthew chapter 13, I want to read from verse 24 on, and I want you to notice the way that Jesus himself is speaking here. Jesus told them another parable. This is a parable was always given in order to try and teach something. The kingdom of heaven is like. Now, the way that he approaches, you'll notice that the chapter opens up with the parable of the sower. Then there's the parable of the mustard seed, the parable of the net, etc., is all found within this section. And every time he started off with saying, the kingdom of heaven is like. And this particular one caught my attention. Now, what I want to do, just to get us right again, and I am a timeline person, I honestly believe that it's always very important for us to keep in mind that we have been given a starting point. Events did happen in this period of time, which clarifies that what God has said is a fact. If you go to, keep your finger there, and you go with me to Deuteronomy, chapter 18, there's a very interesting event brought out there. God is speaking, and he's talking to them about a prophet, Deuteronomy chapter 18. And I want to start from verse 15 on. Well, maybe I'll start with verse 14. The nations you will dispossess, listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so. Now, the interesting thing here is that people go to other sources in order to find out what's going to happen in the future. They go to people that are going to look down and they study the palm of your hand, or they go to people who throw bones down on the ground in order to determine, or they will read the stars. Now, God says you're not allowed to do that. He then says, if you don't have this, what I want you to understand is I'm giving you something. You don't need to go to that. I'm going to give you something. And what he says, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own brothers. You must listen to him. Now, it's interesting. He's saying out of your nation, a prophet will arise. And the word the prophet there, now you'll notice that when Jesus was on earth and John the Baptist, they would approach him and ask him, are you the prophet? And John the Baptist said, no, I'm not the prophet. And then, Jesus, when he was confronted on that, didn't say no, just responded. Now, out of the Jewish nation, a prophet would arise. Now, for this is what you asked for. asked of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God, or nor see his great fire anymore, or we will die. So he's saying, because you didn't want to listen to me speaking to you, I have devised a means by which I can speak to you, but it'll be through somebody human. It'll be somebody that you can deal with. Then God says, further on, verse 17, the Lord said to me, what they say is good. I will raise up for them a prophet, verse 18, like you from among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I commanded him. If anyone does not listen to my words that the prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call him to account. Then he says something here that's very important. I want you to pick up on this. But a prophet who presumes to speak in my name anything I have not commanded him to say, or a prophet who speaks in the name of other gods, must be put to death. So he's saying, if people claim that I'm saying this, and it's not what I'm saying, the way that you should deal with that person is take him out. Then it says further, you may say to yourselves, how can we know when a message has been spoken by the Lord? There's this question, clear question. If somebody comes to you and predicts something over you, you know, you get a lot of people nowadays that come to you and they say, I'm prophesying over you. How do you know if what they are saying is from the Lord? That is a very important question. Verse 22, if what a prophet proclaims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true, that is a message the Lord has not spoken. Now that is something I want you to really pick up. God says that when I say something, my words will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I sent it out for. I will, if I've said it, you can bet your bottom dollar on it. But if somebody else comes and says it in my name and it doesn't take place, that person should be stoned, because if I've said it, you can bet it's going to happen. So how do you know that a prophet is true, especially when he's speaking from God? Is that what has been predicted happens. Now, if we read Daniel, we find out that he was a prophet of God, used as an instrument, and he predicts things. Then, you know, and in his predictions, we have the period of the Jews, and there's a reason why I'm bringing this out. Started then and ended in AD 34. And then we have a period in between here that was 1,260 years, also brought out in his things, 538 AD to 1798 AD. And these are all historical aspects that you can go and look up. It's not thumb sucking. And then there's another period of time, which is the 2300. And I'm putting this all down because I can't tell you how important it is that we constantly remind ourselves of these dates. Now, the important thing to bring up here, the word has clearly said that when God says something and it happens, you can know for a fact that the message came from God. Now, something that's very interesting is that we're trying to understand. We have now gone past 1844. We're in 2016. And the question that pops up is this, quite simply. We need to know without a doubt in our minds that we are living in the last days. And one of the questions that keep coming up is, how can we anticipate the end? What can we look forward to know that we are actually living in the last days? Matthew chapter 13. I want to come to this. The kingdom of heaven is like. Now, why Jesus starts this off, he wants you to understand something about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is not something that's going to come in the future and all of a sudden change you. It is something that is already here on earth. Jesus, when he started his ministry, said the kingdom of heaven is here. If you read the story of Daniel 2, there's a stone cut out of the mountain and it lands on the earth, smashes all the kingdoms of the earth, and it fills the whole earth. Something about God's kingdom, it's not something that is one day going to all of a sudden come and we are going to be changed in the twinkling of an eye to fit that area. We are already being prepared for that kingdom now. The way in which you live now is actually getting you ready. Now, so one thing I want to get clear here. A lot of people expect that at the second coming, there's going to be this radical change in your life. It's not going to be like that. If you haven't changed before, you're not going to change there. Now, I'm going to show you the story. The parable of the weeds. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in the field. Listen to that. He sows good seed. Now, this story is one of the most powerful parables told, and I'm going to bring it out in various ways. It's Matthew chapter 13, verse 24. So a man goes out, he sows good seeds. Then it says, but, verse 25, while everyone was sleeping, his enemy, notice that, his enemy, came and sowed weeds amongst the wheat and went away. So we have the one person sowing the wheat, the good seed, and we have another person coming in the evening when nobody's watching and he sows weeds. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. So now we have weeds and wheat growing at the same time. I want you to be aware of this. We are talking about something that has happened since the creation of the world, even prior to the creation of the world. We've had two things growing. We've had weeds and wheat. Then it says there quite clearly, verse 27, and a lot of people do this. The owner's servant came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Listen to the way in which the question is posed. Didn't you sow good seed in the field? So the question is, when you sowed seed, wasn't it only good seed? But it can also imply that, did you only sow good seed? Did you hear that? It can be that didn't you only sow good seed? Or didn't you sow good seed? Now, the way in which it's put there, because what has happened, then they ask, where then did the weeds come from? Do you hear the way in which the question's been posed now? The servants come, they see now that there isn't only wheat that's growing, but there's weeds growing. They only saw one person sowing because the other one sowed in the evening. So by looking at the sower now, they are looking and saying, did you sow two kinds of seeds, a good one and a bad one? Did you only sow good seed? Or did you sow bad seed also? Because there's a problem now. In the field, we've got weeds and we've got wheat growing. Who's responsible for this? Now, there's something that we need to pick up here. And that is that if we don't have the information or the answer to this question, then God stands guilty. Now, I'm going to show you how real this is. Then it says further, an enemy did this. So now he's saying in his defense, I didn't do this, an enemy did it. But the people on this side are now looking, but we didn't see anybody else except you sowing. You understand? Now listen to what it says further. The servants asked him, do you want us to go and pull them up? No, he answered. Now we have something. Notice how simple the answer is. Who did this? An enemy did it. And there's no further explanation. Okay, well, now that we know that an enemy did it, should we go and pull out the weeds? Should we go in and separate or just pull them out? The master responds, no, he answered, because while, verse 29, you are pulling the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them. That means that you're going to destroy both. Let both grow until the harvest. Now, I want to come back. What we are expecting at the second coming is a harvest. I want you to understand this. The second coming is not something that's going to change people. You either weeds or you are wheat.
Mr. Christian.
Yes.
Read he says, no, because you are pulling the weeds. While you pull up the weeds, you may uproot the weeds.
Yes.
That can also be said about the harvesters right at the end, because they get told to take the weeds out then. They could also take the...
Well, hang on. There's something different now. When the wheat and the weeds were small, in trying to pull out the weeds, first of all, the important thing was to identify the difference between the two. Now, wheat and weeds, in the beginning, I don't know if any of you ever planted seeds, look the same. When the shoots just come out, you kind of wonder, we get all excited, I planted beans, it must be beans. And then when you look at it grow, it becomes a khaki boss. Or something else, and you think, I didn't plant that. You see, in the beginning, the problem is, like with people, you can't see if the weeds are wheat. They look the same. And the only way that you find out what they are like is let them grow. The farmer, the one who's sown the good seed, has said, this is his counsel. Don't do anything. Let them both grow. Now, in the end here, we tend to want to separate people ourselves. We want to, you go to church or not to church, okay, you're going to hell or not to hell. We want to separate, but sometimes we must let people grow. We mustn't jump to our conclusions too quick. We will be surprised sometimes that what we thought was wheat would actually have been wheat. So then the next thing it says, at the time, they both grow until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters. Now listen to what does he tell the harvesters to do first, Pat? What does he say to the harvesters first? There in verse 30.
It says, let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares. Okay,
let's just stop there. What do they gather first together? What is first gathered together there?
The good ones.
No. No, it doesn't. You're reading, it's not what's read there. Read again. Let both grow until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect what? The weeds. It didn't.
I was just going back to the beginning where it says, first the good seed was sown.
Yes, no, but you must read what is said there.
The good seed was sown first, and only after the good seed was sown.
The weeds, but no, we're talking.
The weeds were sown.
Yes, but hang on. I'm not interested in the sowing time. Okay. I'm interested in the harvest time.
Okay, the reaping. Okay.
The reaping. That's what we all wanting to know. What's happening at the second coming?
First the tares and bind them into bundles and burn them.
Yeah, okay, that's correct. So the first one, what are they doing with the weeds?
Removing them.
They are now at the harvest time. What is first removed? Listen to what I'm asking you. Wheat or wheat?
The weeds.
The weeds, are being removed first. Okay, are you with me? What is not being removed first? The wheat. Now, I'm going to say this quite strongly again. Tim LaHaye, in his book, accounts that the wheat will first be harvested and the weeds will be left behind. Which means, and his implying is that the weeds will now have a chance to become wheat. Now, at the second coming, which is noted to be a time when God all of a sudden does something, he is doing something, but it's not according to what people are teaching. God does this very clearly. He says the weeds will first be caught together and tied in bundles, prepared and to be thrown into the fire. Then he says, and if you look at it first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. Now I want you to see something very clear, and I'm going to show you a little bit further on that there's an explanation given by God himself. I want to eradicate quite clearly right here that at the second coming there is no further probationary time granted to mankind. And I want you to notice something, and I'm going to say this quite bluntly. in the book Left Behind, the concept is that those of God's children, because what's going to happen with planes, people are going to fly in the plane, all of a sudden the pilot's going to disappear. And the person who disappears is actually God's child. Now, according to the parable, that's back to front. The person who first should disappear is the bad person, not the good person. According to the parable, I'm going to show this. So at the second coming thing, one thing I want to get very clear, there is no second chance after the second coming for any person to find himself in a probationary period to change from weeds to wheat. Can't. You're either going to be weeds or wheat here. When God comes, his counsel is very clear. I'm going to collect the weeds first and throw them in the fire, tie them up in bundles, and then I'm going to take my wheat and put them in my barn. It's clear. There is no, I'm going to leave the weeds and let's see if they will change and become wheat. No, they bundle up and burn. And now there's a reason why I'm pushing this. Because at the second coming, I want you to understand one of the reasons why Christ has not returned is because of that very reason. He cannot come until you've either decided that you are wheat or weeds. There is no second chance. So this, as exciting as what it is for us to expect the return of Christ in the clouds of heaven, it's a day of judgment also. It's the day of the Lord. It's a day when he's coming to collect the wheat into the barns and the weed into the fire. There's no further probationary period given. So what I'm trying to say to you, we are living. Now that's the first thing I want you to notice. I want you to go and look at something, and the next question that pops up here is simply the argument against God, and that is that, didn't you only sow good seeds? Then where does the devil come from? It's implied that God also created the devil. And that is really, first of all, wrong. God never did that. But what does the word teach me?
But wasn't he changed into the devil?
Who?
When him and his...
Well, you said something now. Did God make him a devil or did he become a devil?
Well, he was Jesus' brother.
Yes, but so let's just hang on. Was he created a devil or was he a devil? Did he become a devil?
I think he became a devil.
Please go with me to Ezekiel. Now, only Ezekiel in this particular one. And I want you to look at Ezekiel with me, chapter 38. Not 38. 28, thank you. I want you to look at chapter 28, yes. And I want you to listen to these words. God says to him in Ezekiel chapter 28, you were the model of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. This is verse 11 on. Verse 12 on, sorry. It talks about how that God made him. He was perfect, beautiful, everything. It says there at the end of verse 13, on the day you were created, they were prepared. Now he talks about the incredible beauty. Chapter 28, verse 13 on. You were in Eden, the garden of God, it says. Then it says in verse 14, you were anointed as a guardian cherub. For so I ordained you. Now listen to what God has been doing. I made you a guardian cherub. I ordained you. You were perfect. You were beautiful. You were in my presence. You were at the mountain of God. It says you were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fire stones. Then it says, verse 15, and listen to the statement made there. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created.
And also just that word created, please emphasize it, because
Yes,
Jesus was not created.
That's correct.
Jesus is not his brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
But let me just see something here. You were blameless in the ways from the day you were created. So what is God making? A very powerful statement here. What's God saying here that's very powerful? I didn't create you that way.
Yeah.
I did not create you like this. It says you were blameless in all your ways from the day you were created. And then there's a key word that pops up there. What's that key word? Till. Till means something. What does till mean?
A point in time.
That means somewhere in time something happened to you. Till, it says there, wickedness was found in you. It wasn't found in me, it was found in you. It's the same as Adam and Eve. When God created Adam and Eve, He created them perfect. Till wickedness was found in them. Now, how does wickedness how was wickedness found in Adam and Eve?
Through Satan.
Through a choice. A choice changed everything. They chose to eat from the tree. Sin has its origin in a choice. And I want you to notice something about us on planet Earth. We sin because we choose it. It doesn't just happen to you. Now, as a result of Adam and Eve's thing, now there's a reason why I'm bringing this out. I want you to go back to Matthew 13. You see, I'm very interested in more the condition of man and why Christ is coming back than the way in which He is coming back. He's not coming back to take His children away and giving the wicked a chance to survive. That's very clear. If you've got that perception of the second coming, you are, and with maybe even with that thought in mind, you think, okay, all right, when up to the time that Jesus comes, I'll be rebellious, and then when He comes, I'll still have a chance of turning over, but in hard times, because that's what is predicted in the book Left Behind, that in difficult times, you will then have to surrender to God, and it'll be almost impossible. That's not true. You're going to have to do it before. Now, the interesting thing, if that's the case, then the word teaches me something very interesting. You know, first of all, I want you to understand something. Without us meaning it, we are actually placing God on trial through our own lives. How many times has God not been blamed for a Christian's life who has not lived a good life? How many times haven't people said, if that's what Christianity is all about, I don't want to know God at all? And sadly, we become the representations of what God is like. Now, the very subtle thing here is that the word teaches me something here. That when we're looking at what's happening in the harvest field, we only see weeds and wheat, and we only saw one person sow. We need somebody to tell us what's really going on. And the only person who can really tell us what's really going on is the one who knows everything. And He says, an enemy came in the evening while we were all sleeping and planted his weeds, his seed. Now listen to this. Matthew chapter 13, I want you to jump down to verse 36. When the crowds had left, His disciples came to Him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. Listen to that. They didn't say, explain to us the parable of the wheat in the field. They said, please explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. Now, how many of us don't want that question answered? Because how did the weeds get there? How did Satan get there? How does it? That's the question. We don't ask how did the wheat get there. We ask now where does sin come from? And by pure reasoning, we blame God. Because He's the one, He's the creator. Now listen to this. He answered, verse 37. This is God giving the answer. And there are certain things you need to understand here. When God says something, you either have to decide He's truthful or He's a liar. Straight away, you can presume, you can at that moment become the judge of God. I want you to understand, God is actually saying to you, I'm going to tell you the truth. Let's think of this in this way. In John chapter 14, Jesus says, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it wasn't so, I would have told you. So he's saying to them, you either got to believe me or don't believe me, but if I'm telling you the truth. Now he's saying here, he answered, the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. So now what's he saying? Because what do we pick up about the Son of Man? Something that we need to clearly understand here about the Son of Man. John 1 teaches me that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then it says something very interesting, that everything that was created by the Son of Man. This Son of Man is God in human form, Emmanuel with us. And now it's saying something, and it's a statement made by God himself. I planted good seed. God's standing up and giving his defense, and he's saying, I planted good seed. Verse 38, verse 38. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. He's so powerful here. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is at the end of the age. Listen to what he's saying. The harvest is at the end of the age. And the harvesters are angels.
Where is that?
Matthew chapter 13, verse 39. Then I want you to notice verse 40 clearly defines the process. As the weeds are pulled up and burned where? In the fire. There's no second chance here. So it will be at the end of the age. So I want to just stop there. Something that I want you to really pick up here. You can either believe God or call him a liar. But he's saying two things. The Son of Man only sows good seed. He's by implication saying God only created good because God is good. No evil came from his hand. But then he defines very clearly, as we read in Ezekiel chapter 28, till you chose to be evil. And we recognize that one of the gifts that God gave us was the gift to choose to be good or bad. We can choose. God doesn't make you good or bad. He makes you good, but you choose to be bad. So something that is really clear to me here, and I want to bring it out, is that we need to make people aware that first of all, when Christ comes in the clouds of heaven, and it's the end, there is no second chance. Now, let's use it in our lifespan today. If you come to the end of your life like this friend of mine did, she passed away on Friday, that's the end. Even though she hasn't experienced the end of Christ coming, she has experienced her own personal end, which means that at her end it is finished. There's no further chance. There isn't a purgatory that she's going to, or a place where she's going to sit while somebody decides for her as to what, if they're going to extend her more time. What she's basically will be waiting for is the harvest time.
Yeah,
Judgment. We need to be very clear on that. So what I want to really emphasize more than anything today is this. There's a lot of speculation as to what's going to happen when Jesus comes. But when he comes, it will be, according to this parable, to take weeds and throw them in the fire, and to take wheat and put them in his barn. Jesus says in John chapter 14, when I come, I'm coming to fetch you to be with me where I am. And he's talking to those who believe in him. That is the event we really need to be, or the point in the event that we really need to be focusing on. So let me just end it off this presentation by saying this. What's going to happen here? Economy collapsing, world people's viewpoints being difficult to give solutions to the problem. What's happening here is going to happen no matter what I want to choose, and in ways in which we might not fully understand now. I might not know exactly what's going to happen here. But I do know this. The day that Christ comes in the clouds of heaven, it is finished. You're either going to be weeds or wheat. You're either going to be sheep or goats. There's going to be no alternatives. My question to you is, what are you doing in your preparation time? What are you doing about that? How are you focusing on it? You know, and I'm going to tell you something that I firmly believe. And again, when I look at Revelation chapter 18, the only way in which people will be released from the captivation they find themselves in, that means that even in their concepts of thinking or the way in which they live, will only be revealed when we clearly tell them that you are determining your destiny. That you are in your daily lives. I don't care what it is. You can be working, you can be sitting at home doing nothing. Whatever you have chosen to do in the lifespan given to you is determining if you're going to be weeds or wheat. That's what's really happening. If you are under tremendous stress, when you make your decisions in those moments of stress, are you making them bearing in mind that I'm choosing to be weeds or wheat? Regardless, I mean, if you've experienced a terrible accident, are you going to be weeds or wheat? Now, I'm really concerned about that. I get very worried because when I see how people in small things don't realize how those small things are determining the big thing. When you neglect the small thing, the probability is you're going to neglect it when it's big. If you haven't grown accustomed to, in your small ways, always turn to God, you're not going to turn to Him when it really comes to the punchline. Pharaoh, typical example. God started with just the water turning to blood. But every decision he made, and there was 9 major decisions before God called him to account to make the most important one. Now, the interesting thing about the story of Pharaoh, everything that God said happened. He warned Pharaoh every time before he did something. He warned him. Pharaoh refused to heed the warning.
I think he had an unfair advantage on us.
Who?
I think he had an unfair advantage on us.
No, we have an advantage too. Now I want to come back to that. Revelation. You have to go. Revelation has to be studied. So what I'm actually trying to say to you, Garth, and this is something that's relevant. The devil is busy here. What is the devil doing? He's sowing bad seeds. People don't realize that. You are being influenced moment by moment to rebel against God.